Hey everyone, and welcome to the AI Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Joseph, and today we're very lucky to have AI consultant Chris Ballard on the podcast. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi there, Sam. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, no, no. Well, great to catch up with you again after we spoke at Ian Oswald's LLM Playgroup, which is
Mm,
before Christmas, wasn't it?
yes.
But let's dive into our first regular question, which is, what is your technology origin story? How did you get into technology and AI?
Yeah, I love this question. Yeah, it really gets you thinking about your history, doesn't it? Yeah, so I've been working in technology for nearly 30 years now, which is crazy, really. It's gone very quickly.
Uh,
How did I get started? Well, I remember when I was a teenager, my dad, this must be back in the late 80s, early 90s. My dad bought PCs for his business and got one at home, and an early Amstrad PC 1512, and that got me into PCs, into figuring out how they work, starting with DOS batch files, and then progressed to learning to program using Quick Basic and Pascal, and I was largely self-taught at the time. So that was probably like the very, beginning of my sort of nascent interest in technology. Kind of introduced me to it all around the same time as PCs and personal computers were beginning to develop, really. Um, and I studied physics at university. Um,
Same here.
I was kind of really fascinated by more of the computational side. So I loved computational physics and mathematical modeling. And that led me into my first job, where I was actually working on a Y2K migration project for the Y2K bug, which takes me back. So
Mhm.
working on AS400, IBM AS400 mainframes and Visual Basic solutions for data integration, really. And then what followed that was really a long sort of career focused in the ed tech sector. Actually, I worked for 16 years in ed tech,
Mhm.
starting off my working life in QA testing, actually, in that kind of area, moving on to leading software engineering teams, working on data integration projects and projects like, automating the school admissions process
Right.
and those kind of things. And really a key realization for me over that time was our customers in the education sector, local government sectors were collecting tons of data, but they weren't using it well to
Mm.
drive better outcomes. And that really made me kind of realize for the first time, actually, I'm driven by um, helping people use data to make better decisions
Mm.
than they currently are. And at that time, business intelligence was the current buzzword of the time. And
Mm.
I got involved in OLAP and data warehousing solutions for clients, which then really led on to my sort of exposure to using machine learning for the first time, which obviously builds on a lot of my background in statistical analysis that I learned in at university, where I worked with a university on a really interesting research project, really to explore could we use machine learning and data science to identify students at risk based on heterogeneous data sources like academic records, VLE usage, attendance, things like
Right.
that. Super interesting project,
Great.
actually, which then led on to the development of a student learning analytics platform. So that moved from research to developing a prototype to running a team based in Brazil, developing that into one of the first learning analytics platforms that were out there. And
Mm.
then really my career in data science grew from that point. So at that point in time, I decided to study for a master's degree in data science. Um, really focused on uh, particular research interest was optimizing machine learning ensembles. Still
Mm,
a like committees of experts. Still
right.
really fascinated by that in this modern sort of LLM era. And then progressed from there to a number of roles leading machine learning research teams
Mm,
in various different businesses, working across market research, email security using machine learning to detect advanced email phishing attacks.
hmm
Um, and my career, I guess, just sort of summarizing that, my career has taken me from, engineering into engineering leadership, product management, consulting, more latterly, over the last 10, 15 years, AI engineering and CTO roles. And
right.
it's combined what I love about technology, really, which is digging into a problem, understanding it, and creating solutions for it.
Mm,
That's ultimately what motivates me.
mm.
Really, I think that summarizes things.
Great. Yeah, and then that's led up to what you're currently doing, your Justified AI, your consulting company, and I mean,
Mhm.
I guess that's fantastic coverage of the whole background there. Yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of thinking nostalgically for the 80s. I got a retro Spectrum, ZX Spectrum for Christmas, and got the old manuals, was playing
Mm.
around with that. But yeah, yeah, it's well, what a great story. And I'd love to hear more about the Justified AI. But it sort of segues nicely into our second question, which is like, how is AI affecting your life and work? And of course, as we all know, the last 5 years have been explosive in terms of really. I mean, but I was always sort of embarrassed to refer to AI,
Mhm.
in that the period
Mm.
before then, because it
Mm.
just sort of like people had images from
Yep.
films and this, that, and the other, and I think the reality was so far away from that. And even with the shortcomings of the current AI, it is now something that seems like science fiction. And I'm just really interested. Yeah, one, how is it affecting your work? Obviously, it's a big work, but also your life, just in your day to day.
Mm.
Is it? I think that's really interesting. The
Mm.
degree to which the new AI has penetrated people's, how they get things done. But yeah, over to you.
Mm.
Yeah, what's going on with AI for you at the moment?
Oh, that's a good question, a big question, isn't it?
Mm,
I agree with you actually. Likewise, in the kind of early days of um, the AI hype, let's call it that. I was always a bit embarrassed to use the term AI, and we've kind of all coalesced onto that term. And I do still like to, focus on, when we talk about AI, we're really talking about machine learning at its heart.
mm,
But sort of colloquially, um, when you're talking to clients or you're talking to family or friends, I'm talking to my dad, for example.
mm,
Um, People understand the term AI, so that tends to be the one we refer to. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, um, so I started Justified AI about 2 years ago,
hmm
um, really because I felt that with my combination of experience, like I mentioned earlier on, covering um, product consulting, strategy, um, and my real motivation to try and use data and use AI to make a difference. That's really what I
mm,
love to do. That's ultimately why I started the business, and the reason it's called Justified is because I feel strongly that the use of AI and associated techniques like machine learning needs to be done for justifiable reasons, and
mm,
that always is at the heart of every engagement I do with a client. I will only recommend to use AI if I genuinely think there's a need
right.
there. And so, it's what I am currently seeing is a lot of diverse kind of needs in AI. So I've been working with startups,
hmm
building at the forefront of AI, so building with LLMs and agentic kind of systems.
hmm
Um, I've been working on the strategic side as well, where businesses really feel like there is an opportunity for them. They obviously recognize what's going on with AI. They're hearing a lot
Mm,
about it and looking at what they do, they're starting to recognize, hey, it feels like we should do something, but we don't know where to start.
mm,
That's quite a common need. But
hmm
also, classical machine learning and optimization problems are still there as well, and still many problems need to be solved that way. So working with clients on, optimizing retail sales, for
hmm
example. So not talked about much these days, certainly in the mainstream media, but still lots of work to do in that area. And
mm,
I would say sort of something I've noticed is the fundamental challenges are the same as when I started this,
mm,
15, 20 years ago, as they are today.
hmm
Understand the problem, measure what works, ensure what you're doing improves things. Um, and what's changed now, I think, that I'm seeing with clients is AI gives us an ability to move with speed, but
mm,
that means I like to make sure that you balance speed with sustainability. You can
right.
quickly develop something, but is it sustainable for the future?
Yeah.
So a whole diverse range of needs that are out there at the moment, which is super interesting.
Good stuff. Yeah, and then so right, lots of different engagements with different organizations, and yes, I guess then the the thing that's changed as a result of the AI is whereas before it might have been okay, we're looking at your problem, you've got this data, you might need an analysis. Actually, if you adjust this workflow, your problem goes
Mm,
away. And that's comes back to your core of only use these things when there's a genuine need. And we've had added to the sort of
mm,
shall we say, it's not a smorgasbord, it's not the word I want to use, but the
mm,
toolkit that we
mm,
have,
mm,
which is all sort of like couched in the like understanding the basic problem. There's different kind of ML techniques, optimizations, linear programming, blah, blah, blah. Now there's
mm,
also right there's this the new AI. I mean, it's fun.
mm,
In my head. I sort of feel I want to impose like the nomenclature that I'm using in my head on the rest of the world, which is I guess we're
mm,
always doing that to some extent. But it's
mm,
yeah to go back to that the embarrassment about using the term AI. Like I think if pre 2020 or let's say 2022 or I guess 2020, because how fast has it really gone? But if you were referring to an ML system that was
mm,
doing categorization as AI, that just seemed to kind of muddy the
mm,
water. I mean, I think
mhm,
everything we're
mhm,
doing as technologists is sort of like a black box to people who are not into
mm,
it. But yeah, so now when I'm working with stakeholders and so on, and I'm saying I'm using an AI, and let's say I'm using I don't know Claude Opus, it
mm,
feels like the right term to use.
mm,
I mean, I
mm,
could say I'm using an LLM to get advice, but that seems
mm,
needlessly obscure.
mm,
But yeah, I'm rambling on. I very much connect with what you were saying about um,
mm,
using it with a genuine need.
mm,
Also losing my train of thought for some reason. It's been a bit of a rough few weeks.
mm,
But so yeah, like I guess what I lean towards is yes. So I guess what you're finding is in these engagements, sometimes you might recognize you might recommend, okay, maybe you should introduce these folks to Claude Code, or maybe you want to set up a RAG system here, or it's just yeah, it's sort of the new AI has just expanded the range of tools that are
mm.
available in these engagements. Is that the kind of key? Is that a good summary, or please feel free to correct me.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I mean, you asked earlier on about, how has it affected my personal life? I think,
Mm,
or aspects of my work, how I run my business, say
right,
for
right,
for for example.
yeah.
I think AI generally is a huge enabler, especially when you're running your own business, with limited time,
Mm,
for example. And I think, personally, what I found is. I think what we have now with AI is a multifaceted tool that we can apply to many different types of problems.
mm,
Whether it's
mm,
the right tool to to apply to different problems is,
sure.
debatable in some situations. But
Yeah, totally.
because of that, it's quite a key unlock. And so some examples that I might give sort of in my personal life are
Mm,
I've always tried to keep extensive notes and my thoughts and meeting notes and transcribe calls and
Right.
those kind of things. And the key unlock really is give your AI tool of choice, whether that's Claude or whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever,
Yeah.
give it access to that context. That becomes a massive unlock to productivity.
Mm.
And so, for example, one of the ways I'm finding with that is, you know, problem solving.
Mm.
Um, with AI in a way that's grounded in what you know about a particular problem, in your thinking about the problem,
Mm.
enables you to be much faster, more creative, and less kind of fixated on a track that you follow because that's your experience.
Mm.
AI has enabled me to be able to explore a wider variety of problems. And I think that's a real key enabler for anyone, really.
Mm.
Um, uh, and I think for me personally, what I've seen personally, what I see with others is I'm shifting from an executor to a director.
Okay.
I suppose by that I mean, you know, even 2 years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I would be needing to execute every detail bit of analysis I wanted to do.
Right.
Now what I can do is shift that to directing something, AI to help me and partner with me in that. If that makes sense, you're
Yeah.
like directing it, and I
Yes.
think what that means is for anyone in that kind of paradigm shift, communication skills are more important than ever. I've always valued
Mm.
kind of communication skills, but the real key thing to get that key unlock is, can I describe the problem I want you to help me tackle in a really
Mm.
succinct and precise way. So I think super interesting at the moment. I've got some examples of, if you want me to expand on that, but
Yeah. I mean, I would be interested. I mean, and you're talking in an area that I'm also experiencing. I would say that over the course of the last, yeah, I mean, in the last year, I've moved myself from. It used to be that I would write all this code, and now I'm not writing any code anymore. I'm looking at a lot of code, but I'm not writing any code, and I'm in this situation,
mm,
and I think this is, I'm both excited and also I think that there's still this danger, which was always there. Like, for example, if you were like
mm,
putting some code together, right? There's lots of things like for example, test driven development. Like you write the tests first, and it means that
yep,
you see them fail, right? And what that means is that it's it's less easy to forget to check that the tests will actually test the right thing afterwards. Like if you write the code first and then you write the tests
yeah,
afterwards, like it's are they pass? I mean, if you're very rigorous with yourself, you can say, right, I will go back and carefully break things to make sure. But that sort of test driven development is sort of it's a crutch for the human that will kind of miss a thing, and people have whether you like TDD or not, it's but that's whenever you're working on something, as you work longer and it gets time, well,
mm,
there's a danger that you'll miss things.
mm,
And now with the AI,
mm,
there's you can get it to do the code for you and set up do the analysis for you, and then you're kind of I think all of us knowing that the new AI is still got all sorts of little shortcomings here and there, so it's very important to check our work. What I can see is that it's just I think the ongoing struggle for everybody is like, well, it's done all this stuff. How do you force yourself to
mm,
check it rigorously enough? And it's got this range of problems, isn't it? Like certain sorts of problems are trivial for the AI to solve, like a simple analysis. It's kind of, but it's well, I'll link this into because I was sort of someone was asking me recently about the difference in agentic and AGI and so on, and I think I feel like the big
mm,
difference in AGI and AI at the moment is that the AGI would be at the level of a really competent human. Like if you ask a really competent human to do a task, they will double check their working in a way that currently, you know, AI, I mean, they've invested loads of sort of like
Mm,
thinking steps and this and other. I don't know what your experience is. I still feel it misses things that I would expect a
mm,
really competent human not to miss. Do you know what I mean?
mm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess I'm in the same position as you. What I really feel in the last year is I'm now shifted to that. The executor was me coding all the time,
Right, right,
and then maybe getting AI to check some of it and
right.
auto-complete bits.
Yep,
And I've
yep.
now shifted entirely, almost to, or maybe
Right,
95%
right.
to I'm directing it to develop this for me.
Mm,
And I think that is game changing.
yeah,
So
totally.
on one level, I can now develop things that I'm not a front end developer, but I can now develop React apps,
Right,
and I know enough, and I'm experienced enough coder to be able to understand what's generated. But prior to this, 2 years ago,
right.
I didn't really have the time to learn that. So
Sure,
it's
sure.
game changing in that sense. But the downside is, um, it's difficult to look through somebody else's code. I think it always has been.
Yeah.
If you're doing peer review on or pair, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, pair programming or pull
Pair
request
programming.
review.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's actually difficult because everyone has a slightly different style.
Yes,
You
yes.
need to understand well, why did you write it like that?
Yeah,
What was your
yeah,
thinking behind that? And I think that's the challenging bit for me. I
yeah,
can look
yeah.
through a Python module that AI has generated.
Mm,
And actually, that takes quite a bit of time to do that and
yep,
fully digest it.
yep.
Digest it. And I'm always kind of in a position where I'm thinking, I feel like I need to like really thoroughly check this, but at the same time, that's quite time consuming to do
Yes.
that. Almost more time consuming than writing it myself. And
Mm.
to give you a practical example of that, so I've been working on like a personal finance agent.
Oh yeah.
Um, so like I've been using the same spreadsheet to manage my personal finances for like 20 years, and it's
Mm,
kind of worked. But I was getting a bit annoyed with that because it takes me several hours a month to kind of get on top of things and things like
correct.
that. So I was like, hey, with the current state of things, I'm sure I could, you know, um, use Claude Code to help me migrate to something
Mm,
that enables me to like go through my transactions and categorize them and build an app to keep track of them. And I'd always, tried, I had tried kind of subscription tools, but they never quite worked the way I worked. And
hmm.
I think the unlock here now is actually I can create a tool that works the way I
Right.
work, which I couldn't have done before.
Mm,
Um, and it did a great, it does a great job of building that kind of stuff. But in areas where maybe I gave less specification to things,
sure.
um, it probably put lots of complexity into the code I'd that it developed than was actually necessary.
Mm,
Um, so I think it needs to be steered through experience, and I would say communicating and understanding the problem becomes even more important than it
yeah.
ever did before. And um, I actually think you get the best out of it by um, having that experience to recognize what is well constructed
Yeah.
Python code, React code. Um, where would I, how would I abstract it to make sure it was reusable? What do I need to create a class for?
Mm,
What don't I? And I think that there's a potential challenge there because if you're slightly less experienced, you maybe haven't got that background to fall back on. And the problem with vibe coding is maybe you don't get that hands-on experience so much. So I think there's a bit of a tension there, perhaps.
yeah. It's a very weird world we find ourselves in. I mean, I think what I find is that pretty much now, I generally don't have the assurance of a kind of a mental model. Like when I was like it was just me coding with maybe a little bit of autocomplete support or what have you. There was a kind of a mental model of the flow of the data, the code,
Mm,
the
yeah,
execution, and all of
definitely.
these things in there that was not necessarily perfect. Like I could be, blindsided by something I hadn't anticipated. Oh, that's gonna, oh, that has a, there would be, but they tend to be at a slightly lower level. And now.
mm,
as you say, I mean, it takes us a time to review the AI code, and that's where you've got something, it's working. Okay, I should, the human kind of like, oh, I want to go and have lunch now, or what have you. That sort of, you're in this dangerous thing where it's easy to accidentally skip the careful review that you perhaps should be doing. I mean, the way I'm sort of holding my feet to the fire at the moment is I'm kind of doing
mm,
TDD ping pong with the
mm,
agent
mm,
through, so
mm,
that basically I see every test that it writes. I see the failure message that we get on that test. I'm having it doing things like, well, predict things that I would do with a junior pair programming
mm,
partner. Like, let's predict what failure we would expect to see in this situation. That kind of
mm,
basically, I think, one, it helps me like be more have my make my mental model of exactly what's going on clearer. It's still, I think, not quite as good as when I was actively writing more of the code.
mm,
There's something about that having to generate the code yourself that forces a level of understand. I think it's a bit the difference between sort of
mm,
like recognition and recall. Like, if you are just listening to, let's say you're learning French and you're listening to French words, um,
mm,
if you're
mm,
not
mm,
actually saying them, then
mm.
there's kind of some part of your mind that you're maybe not
You
not
learn by doing, right? Yeah.
right. There's a sort of that active recall sort of like really bakes in a certain level of understanding. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm doing the TDD thing with the sort of ping pong backwards and forwards to try and improve that. It's still not quite as I still, there's a certain lack of satisfaction on my part. I guess it's early days, but I don't know if you saw this. There was a tweet from or an X or whatever from the creator of Claude Code. I think Ian had mentioned it in the playgroup Slack, and
Okay.
he's apparently using these like sort of five agents in parallel and using like iTerm 2 notifications to
Yes.
you think you read that thread,
Mm,
and
mm,
it's sort of, yeah, at the moment with the things that I'm working on, I feel like I have to really kind of maximize my mental model, and often what I find at the end of the day is, okay, maybe with this sort of TDD step by step ping pong approach, I'm doing better than when I was, perhaps giving the agents more freedom. It still feels like something's a bit lacking, but things are going agentic, right? I mean, this
mm,
what a lot. I mean, certainly not everybody's doing it, but that seems to be a big trend at the moment for people to say, right, I'm just going to have, almost the AIs own the code, and hands off
mm,
there, assuming that you've got a sort of a handle on the sort of, end to end feature tests and stuff.
mm, mm. Yeah. I think for me the key is, I mean, we're all still exploring this,
Yeah.
right, and figuring out the best ways to work. And it really is changing how you work for sure. And coding is a really good example, I think, of how AI is affecting um, a particular industry, which may well start replicating in other industries
Mm,
as we go through. But because of its structured kind of nature, code is a clear, and um, access to a huge amount of source code resources in which to train coding models.
mm,
Um, yeah, its structured nature means it was an obvious kind of place to start. But I think, in trying to adapt my methods and figuring out what works, um, it can be very easy, I think, almost to slip back into a um, writing full specifications for things. So I remember when I first started
mm.
in coding, very much kind of waterfall
Oh yeah.
methodology,
Mm,
and obviously that changed and evolved into agile
hmm.
processes which work much better and more productive, and recognize that you can't identify all the problems and all the cases
Right.
up front.
Yeah.
It can be very easy almost to shift back into that mode, because what you're trying to do is provide it instructions and scope out
Mm,
what you're doing, which has to be detailed enough that it doesn't go start exploring incorrect routes. Um, uh, uh, and actually, I think what I'm starting to recognize is that you need to work with it in
hmm.
iteratively,
Yes.
like you're just talking about with the
Right.
TDD approach. I guess
Yeah.
that's one way of doing it. I've scoped it this way, it's generated this code.
Yeah.
I've then got to review it based around my knowledge of what I'm trying to achieve.
Right.
I recognize it's too complex, or you've gone down this route,
Right.
and adapt it. Yeah, it's definitely a learning experience at the moment, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It's when it's going to be interesting to see, and maybe we'll go on to this in our last question of like, if it stays at approximately this level, or if it jumps up. I mean, I think just linking back to something else you were saying there, the about the time it takes to review code. What I've found is it's almost too easy to generate more code than you
Mm,
would have time to review, and so I've kind of
oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
moved back to saying like trying to get it to generate code in the smallest chunks, and it just also occurs to me that one of the issues is that if you do give it like the specification that's perhaps a bit too broad, where you're kind of asking it
Mm,
to do a few too many things, where in that it will then end up kind of dropping the ball in some places in some
mm,
subtle ways. Like with a human, they might say, "I'm overwhelmed. I know we need
mm,
to." I mean, and the new ones do have some. They ask
mm,
clarifying questions, but what I generally don't get,
mm.
the AI is they're so eager to help. They very rarely
Mm.
say, "Look, I think we should stop and go through this step by step." They'll say, "No, no, I've done it. I've done it. It's
Yeah,
fine."
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah.
and the confidence of that is can be deceiving because we know that they make
It it
mistakes.
can, yeah. I think a good example is I've been working on a um like a personal assistant agent with access to
Mm,
my notes and and
mm,
and, and,
mm,
and things like that. And I've been using Claude Code for that, and
mm,
both to develop it and as um the agentic framework to run that. And that's required developing some Claude skills in
mm,
different areas, a skill to um, access notes, a skill to search through notes using semantic kind of search,
mm,
and a skill to access meeting notes. And
right.
I kind of thought about this and wrote an outline of what I needed and got Claude Code to start developing that. And what I noticed was that, interesting in that scenario, um, it went far too far with how it engineered those skills. So it
Mm,
created a lot of, coding cruft for I don't know, taking those notes and organizing them in different ways,
right,
and
right.
hard coding certain points that it wanted to generate back to me from those,
Mm,
rather than I want a skill which is actually a little bit more kind of open-ended and interpretable,
mm,
based upon the kind of questions I'm asking it. And now I'm kind of like, well, I need to get it to refine that. And I think that's an interesting sort of situation because there's lots of upfront direction needed now. And paradoxically, I think, that speed of being able to develop with AI also makes stepping back to understand the problem more critical.
yeah, yeah.
Um, because had I thought about that, I'd have probably explicitly stated that. And generally, I've found whether it's coding or whether it's prompting LLMs for different types of problems, you have to be very, very explicit around, what something means in a
Mm,
way that I don't think you necessarily have to do with somebody who's a domain expert in a certain area. Um,
yes,
so,
yes.
for example, I've um, been working on some AI to help with skills assessment,
Hmm.
um, and using that to assess how well somebody is um, doing with regards to workplace skills.
Mm,
And it's quite a nuanced problem to assess. It's quite subjective. Um, Something that perhaps somebody who knows that person very well would be able to do.
mm,
And the LLM has to be, what does it mean to have good communication skills, for example? You have to be very explicit,
mm.
to avoid it going down wrong assumptions and wrong tracks. And I think the same is true with coding as well, to be honest. Lastly, I've found also if you pick a path, I think where there's lots or pick a coding problem, going back to coding, pick a
Mm.
coding problem where there's lots and lots of examples. It's a well-trodden path,
Right.
like developing my personal finance user interface.
Yeah.
It nailed it with minimal
Yeah.
direction.
Right.
If it's a kind of new problem with a lot of subjectivity, that
Yeah.
needs a lot of more direction and a lot more thinking, and that's the example of the personal sort of assistant kind of agent. So I think that's probably reflective of what it's seeing in its training data. Lots of examples of front end apps, certain patterns that you follow, those kind of things. A lot less examples of how I might build, cool code skills to solve a particular problem, maybe.
No, I think you're exactly right. I found the same thing, in particular, like over Christmas, I was tinkering with this ZX Spectrum Basic, and GPT-5 2 was adamant, about various sorts of things, and it was just repeatedly wrong, and it was like, okay, you're just, you don't have the training data really to manage this. But yeah, I think there's a slight segue, like in terms of giving instruction into the next question, which is about your approach to leadership. And I guess we're sort of leading other humans, we're leading AIs now. Yeah, how do you think about leadership and doing it well?
Ooh, good question. Um, I think in um, I think it's important. I when I lead projects, I think it's important people feel like they have autonomy over their areas of responsibility. It's important for people to feel that um, they own that. Um, and they bring personal personal skills and engineering skills and AI skills that are unique to them. And I like to so if we're talking about kind of building engineering teams or AI engineering teams, having people in those teams that have autonomy, that have the ability to make decisions. And mistakes I've made in the past in leadership have been, I'm the one that makes all the decisions. You tell me the facts and I'll make the decisions, and that doesn't make for a good team. And I've had to learn that over the years. I think the hard way really. But um, uh, uh, so so for me, that's really important with an engineering team, whether that's software engineering or AI engineering, really.
Mm, mm, mm,
Um, I'm also involved in leading AI projects, but from a perspective of defining, the strategy, direction, roadmap for an AI project as well. So, um, and um, I've done that for quite a lot of years in data science and machine learning projects, and now in, LLM orientated projects and and building agents as well. And I think um, for me, I think there's always been this tension in running AI projects where there's a lot more unknown sometimes in an AI project
mm,
than there is in other types of software engineering projects. And has always been, I feel, a tension between um, delivery. You're a startup saying you need to deliver something quickly because you've got limited runway, uh, and tension between that and um, how do you approach that to enable that to happen and deliver a robust product where there's lots of unknowns, and AI brings around can we solve a particular problem with AI in the first place? How well can we solve it? How do we measure it?
mm,
So I think and I think that's existed in machine learning projects from the beginning. To some extent it exists in normal software engineering projects as well, if you
mm,
have a particular area of functionality where it's not, clear how you might technically solve that.
mm,
Um, but AI brings about a perspective where, actually, especially with, modern AI, I can tackle all sorts of problems.
mm,
And there's a instinct to apply foundational models to solve lots of problems because you can solve them quickly.
Mm,
Uh, and in a startup scenario, perhaps that's great because you can bring something to market very quickly.
mm,
But then you need to go to the next stage on that. And how do I develop that in a way that balances cost, that balances efficiency, that is
mm,
sustainable, that is extensible, um,
mm.
which I think brings about its own challenges. And one of the ways I see that bearing out lastly at the moment is although we can apply AI to solve lots of different types of problems, one of the things really I don't see has gone away, which is how do you evaluate those problems and that you're tackling them in the right way and it's
Yeah.
effective. If you think about a machine learning project, I'm classifying customer sentiment. Um, uh, I'd need to develop a training set or use an
Right, right.
existing one and develop according to some labeled data set, and I've got metrics.
Yeah,
With generative AI now, where you're maybe solving more nuanced, subjective problems, and you can do that. That evaluation step, I think, is 100 times harder
mm, mm.
than it was before. Both in terms of maybe you don't have the data to evaluate how well you're solving it with an LLM, but also creating create that very process of collecting that data in the first place can be very difficult and time consuming. And I think actually that's maybe made that problem a little bit worse than it was before in a
Mm.
funny kind of way. And I think one of the things I would strongly advocate for in an AI project is that I do see repeated or done wrong quite a lot
Oh yeah,
is forgetting the need to establish evaluation, however small and however simple that is,
yeah,
because otherwise you don't know whether you're improving and you can't move quickly.
yeah.
And I see that neglected quite a lot, I think, at the moment, and something I think is a foundation of having a good, solid, sustainable kind of approach to how you're building something. Um,
Yeah, yeah. There's almost a parallel in with the TDD thing, in that with the
mm,
ML, like in order to create a model, you would up front need to kind of have to specify your data set. I mean, you could still make mistakes there and like,
sure,
not properly populate test versus validation versus train, and there's all
sure,
sort of
yeah,
things that could go wrong. But at least you were thinking about that before you started training the model. Whereas now the LLM out of the box, fantastic, we've got something. Well, let's get into production. It's yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exciting. We live in
In
interesting times.
information leakage. I'm sure we've got
Uh,
some stories to tell about how we forgot about that. So, yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
Well, but yeah, great answer. Let's move on to our next question, which is your most exciting tech hack, which could be anything. Doesn't have to be AI. Just something that you've a little thing that you've something done with technology recently that you're just like, oh yes, I didn't realize I could do that. That's really handy. Anything you'd like to share there?
Ooh. Uh, a couple of things actually, I think.
Mm,
So, um, one very simple thing. So, I've had a smartwatch for a while. I do quite a lot of thinking kind of out loud.
mm.
So much to my wife's dismay, where I start talking out loud and she thinks I'm talking to her. And no, it's just me thinking through a problem. And actually, I think I've begun to recognize actually I could use that tool that's on my sitting there on my wrist more effectively, and that's just recording voice notes to
Mm,
myself whilst I'm on a walk. I live in the countryside. I can sit, I can do a walk, and it's a really low friction way of capturing my ideas and thoughts
mm,
about stuff.
mm,
And then I think, it's joining things together, joining these technologies together. I can record that. That's great. I've got a record of that, but actually I can then transcribe that and I can then drop that into my notes, and my AI personal assistant agent can use those and remind me of them. And for me, that's been a real kind of hack, if you like,
mm,
that I found that's kind of transformational. Um, and then the other thing is I've started building a drone.
Cool, cool.
which actually I've been working on for far too long because I don't never get enough time to do it.
Right.
But one of the reasons I wanted to do that is I've been involved in like the soft side of technology for so long.
Mm,
I wanted to kind of make something sort of a bit more
tangible.
physical. So
Yeah.
relearning how to solder after last doing it 30 years ago. So and being a bit more hands-on and yeah, I'm finding that quite a fun way to sort of decompress as well, really. So yeah, and I think generally, um, I feel, bringing this back to AI again, we're kind of entering a time where we can use AI to solve kind of some of our own problems
Right.
and use it in a much more personal way than was possible before, which
Yeah.
I think we're only just beginning to see now, which I think is really exciting. I find it exciting anyway.
Yeah, well, it is fascinating. Yes, yes. Well, and it reminds me. I mean, you're talking about the watch thing. Alcatel on the podcast last year was talking about
Mm.
using GPT voice mode to like basically as he walks on his commute
Okay.
to chat backwards and forwards, which I've done a few times. And
Yeah, yeah.
actually now, as I'm doing a sort of a finance course, which goes into some detail, but I'm sort of like as I
Mm,
sort of pause the video and then I have a conversation with
mm,
GPT voice mode if I'm doing my workout and then
mm,
listening to that in the background is but and like just on my side like the Bluetooth keyboard that I got my niece for her iPad is not working well and trying to debug that I'm getting her to use get help from GPT and I'm saying to
mm.
GPT like okay what's the deal here and it's given me a shareable conversation which I've passed on to my sister and my niece and yeah, there's a kind of, I mean, it really has, for so long, Google was the place to search, and I'm definitely going there less and less. It is we're definitely very interesting times. I mean, and no one's got a crystal ball. But our next question, the future of AI. I mean, do you think we've kind of reached a level, and of course now the technology is going to stay stable for a year or two, and it's all going to be about now integration and new ideas and coming through, or do you think we're going to see a new set of big shocks? What? I mean, you've been in technology for 30 years. You've seen so many different changes. What does it look like for you going forward?
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment, the way AI is generally being delivered is through chat,
Mm,
textual chat and voice as well. And there's a lot of I think there's going to be a lot of movement on the voice interaction,
mm,
that multi-turn kind of voice interaction, which sometimes I still can think can be a bit disjointed
mm, mm,
um, at, at the moment. Uh, and so chat is the current default, and we're seeing lots of AI just being bolted onto apps and services as chat, which is
mm,
great, but also kind of, it's sort of the obvious thing to do and maybe not the best way to use I think. And
mm,
I think as people, we all think slightly differently, don't we? Some people think better by writing, some people think better by speaking out loud, some people sketch their ideas, some people go for walks.
mm,
Um, and I think AI needs to evolve to meet those kind of diverse sort of cognitive styles that we all have. Um, so, for example, I'd love to see something where, I can sketch out my ideas
mm,
on my tablet or whatever, and the AI participates with me as a partner rather than it just be a sort of back and forth chat.
mm,
Would be really interesting. Oh, I
mm,
see what you're drawing there, and
mm,
help you develop that idea that you're thinking about in partnership
mm,
in tandem.
mm,
Um, so I think the same is true of like user interface. So, what's the reason we've developed graphical user interfaces as a way of interacting with computers? It's because we're visual people
mm.
by and large. We think visually, we imagine ideas often visually. And I I think with the emphasis on chat, we're kind of missing out on that at the moment.
Mm,
We're kind of losing that aspect.
mm,
And I definitely think an opportunity for AI advancing will be um, having AI embedded into that kind of user interaction rather than it just
Mm,
being chat based. I know Anthropic, for example, a few months ago did an experiment where it could kind of generate an interface on the fly rather than
right.
it being chat. So I think there's clearly exploration going on there.
Yeah.
Um, I think memory is a problem, long-term memory.
Hmm.
AI has no long-term memory, and although there's workarounds with massive context windows, it still means that every request to AI I make means all data needs to be sent through. And
Right.
I think that's inefficient as an interaction model and computationally as well. And our brains don't work that way. And the AI tools now get around that. So a Claude will compact your chat and
Yeah.
basically summarize it, for example.
Mm,
Um, I I'm hoping we'll see some development in the way that kind of long-term memory usage might work, as well as that sort of catastrophic forgetting or forgetting what's
yeah.
in the
Mm,
middle of a long context window. And then lastly, I think like vertical AI agents. So if you think about, we talked a lot about Claude Code and other coding AI assistants. Um, uh, I think we'll start to see that kind of approach in different kind of vertical sort
industries.
of
Yeah.
sectors and industries. Like for example, Jack and Jill for recruitment might be a really good example
Mm,
of that, and I know other ones in cybersecurity and things like that. So yeah, for me, I think it's those kind of three areas where I think there's limitations now
yeah.
that I'd like to see develop further. So super excited about what's to come there, I
Yeah,
think.
no, well, then I think you're absolutely right in all those areas, and that's you're presenting it as an optimistic, like, oh
I'm
yes,
always an optimist.
yeah, which is fantastic and absolutely needed. I mean, I guess I can't end without touching on the like on the AGI side. Like, I don't know if the kind of like description of it being as a competent human that I'm trying to put forward. Like, if we had and like AIs available that were as maybe that you're describing there, like could be a partner as you're developing ideas, that they kind of had that sort of almost human competentness. I mean, we've all worked with people. Like, there's people to lots of different levels of abilities,
Mm.
and you work with humans, and they'll make mistakes, and we
Mhm.
as individuals make mistakes, and but I think
And we learn through mistakes as well, obviously.
absolutely. I think there's definitely, as I've worked in different organizations have different levels of effectiveness at retaining, like the more or less competent people. I think I'm very
Mm.
aware of that, having worked in many different organizations over the years. And
Mm.
but yeah, it does seem like it's 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 still quite a big jump to a really competent human equivalent AI, but yeah, I guess can you now, because it seems to be before the ChatGPT revolution, it seemed
Mm.
like that sort of thing might be many, many years away. In the same way that
Mm.
fusion power has always been now it sort of seems like, oh, okay, we could be a couple of discoveries related to long-term memory or some different sort of like cognitive architecture. We could be not too far away from AIs that have that kind of human coherence in terms of their, okay, right, I remember the conversations we've had over the last year, and do you see that coming, or does it feel further away? And if it does come, do you think that's going to smack us all in the face, or it's just going to be a positive, easy transition as we get used to our new
Mm. Well,
alien?
I should probably raise the fact that if you asked me that conversation that we had a year ago, I probably wouldn't remember it, actually. So I've got a terrible memory for conversation. Um, yeah, um, I, 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 I think there's lots of nuances and complexities around what it means to reach AGI or its kind of human
Yeah,
performance in things. I think often a AGI is talked about in terms of, reaching, a PhD level performance on certain benchmark data sets, for
right.
example. But I personally feel like um, human capabilities and intelligence means lots of different things.
Mm,
It doesn't just mean the ability to answer academic questions.
sure.
It's our ability to empathize, it's our ability to be creative, it's our ability to be um, to apply ourselves to different problems without seeing that being done lots of different times.
Mm,
Like a child being able to identify a picture of a giraffe after seeing it once,
right.
for example.
Sure.
And I think with AI, what we have at the moment is a remarkable ability to mix up and be creative because it's seen lots of data, and that's
Yeah.
tremendously valuable because it sees much more data than I've ever been able to see clearly. Uh,
Mm,
but I so I think when we talk about AGI, we have to be very careful at kind of grounding ourselves in what does human level performance or human level intelligence really mean?
mm,
Um, and the fact that we have an ability to see something and really see um, perhaps the nuances or the unlikely connections in things, which
mm,
is quite a remarkable ability that I think humans have.
mm.
Um, that is going to be difficult to achieve with AGI, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, my personal feeling would be, I think we're many years away from
Yeah.
that. I don't think you're going to see that in the next 5 to 10 years. But maybe if we replay this podcast recording in 5 years' time, maybe I'll be proved wrong. But
Well, it just it feels like it could go either way. It's yeah, no, well, it is again. I keep on saying it. Interesting times. We've kind of gone long. It's been a fantastic conversation. I just throw in, there's not really enough time to do it justice. But the final question, which is, what does it all mean? The life, the universe, and everything. And it doesn't have to be a philosophical or religious answer. It's sort of, almost what necessarily, what does life mean to you? How do you make sense of this strange world we find ourselves living in?
well, I try to be pragmatic, really. We are finding ourselves in times where things are changing, and
Mm,
change is always unsettling, isn't it? And um, we like what's familiar for obvious reasons, and I think there's
mm,
change happening in the world on multiple fronts, not just AI, politically and otherwise, but but I, but I'm pretty pragmatic, and also with every technology comes good things and comes bad things.
mm,
You see that with the internet. It's used for good and it's used for bad. It's brought about tremendous things, and it's also brought about things that could never have been foreseen previously,
sure.
which I think as probably as humans we're not that great at. We tend to see the positives that can happen in a new technology
Mm,
without seeing the negatives. And often there's unperceived negatives that are difficult to solve. But as a kind of people, we have a remarkable ability to adapt as well, which I think we will do, and we've shown over history that we do. And I would say, you know, um, it's changing the nature of work, and I know that is worries a lot of people. Um, I would tend to be pragmatic about that, and I would say I feel like, that it enables us to have a technical partner that understands what we're doing and why, rather than the reverse, which is I think sometimes we can be a bit of a slave to the technology. We have to
mm,
adapt to this spreadsheet or the way the finance works or the rigid kind of workflow that we follow, and it changes that relationship. I think that's where I feel positive about it, from being a slave to the technology to being a partner with the technology
right.
that adapts to us. And I think for me, that's what excites me about the next few years. Actually, yeah,
Yeah, great stuff. Oh, well, Chris, it's been a wonderful conversation.
no worries.
I'm sure the listeners will want to know how they can get in touch or find out more about you. Where would be the best place for them to go and look?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is justified dot AI. Take a look on there, and then you can get in touch with me.
Brilliant. Well, we'll get that link in the show notes. And well, thanks everybody. That wraps up this episode of AI Leadership. If you'd like to be on the podcast or join the Rebel AI or indeed playgroup communities that it's all all associated with it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Sam Joseph. That's sam@neurogrid.com. Please do follow us on Spotify. I think that makes all the difference for the algorithms. And of course, you can add questions and comments there. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on all of these things, AI and other topics, or just feel free to DM me on LinkedIn, and we'll be in your ears again real soon. Finally, big thanks to our guest today, Chris Ballard.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.